Hi, I'm Cliff McKay from Westminster Towers. We're here with our notable neighbor today, Karen Buchan. And, oh, I forgot, I started incorrectly. Breaking news. We have breaking news about Karen today in that she has just recently been named the Volunteer of the Year for Westminster Communities, and we are delighted to have her here and to recognize her today with regard to that. Oh, and you have a special name tag. People will have to, I don't think I can read that from here, but they'll have to check it out when they meet you and congratulate you. But that's terrific, Karen. I know you've put in a lot of
thank you.
A lot of effort. What are some of the things that you've done this year as volunteer?
Well, I serve on several different committees at Westminster, Winter Park, Baldwin Park, the Healthcare Committee, the Wellbeing Committee, which helps to plan all the activities that are offered every month, and actually according to a corporate theme that we have every month. I've been on the Cultural Endowment Committee, where we've selected programs for that activity. I also had the Resident Council Employee Scholarship Fund, try to get the name right, which grants funds up to $3,000 a year for employees at Westminster. Serve on the Resident Council. I guess that's one of the more time-consuming things as secretary. Happy to do that this year, and also I did that for 3 years in the past. So stay busy here.
Which of these things sort of tickles you the most, excites you the most?
Probably the scholarship committee, because it's so heartwarming to, well, not to name any names, but there is one employee who just in the last couple of years finished her AA degree after working on it for probably 20 years. And now she's pursuing a bachelor's degree in business. And taking one, maybe two classes at a time, and doing her homework with her kids, and it's really rewarding to see someone just keep pursuing education.
That is terrific and encouraging. I've often been very supportive and interested in that work and that aspect that we do here. How does that work exactly? Does the employee come up with and request it, or I know you pay the funds directly to the institution?
We, put the information out there through the Human Resources Department and through some of their, I don't know if they're doing it now, but they were doing some town hall meetings for employees that were like our resident town hall meetings, and put the information out there. They need to be here for 6 months. They need to be working or pursuing a degree in an area that they could reasonably have a job in that area with Westminster. Not necessarily, it could be someone who's a server who wants to go into the business department or that type of thing.
Not necessarily in where they're working at this point.
Right, but just a job that would be available at Westminster, in Winter Park or anywhere in any of the communities.
What, about how many people do you have in this program at any given time? How many people are under scholarship?
Just a handful. And we also do certifications. So as an example, when Andy first came to work here, Mike Hay requested that we fund a certification program for him in fire safety in facilities like this. And we did that. So you can do certifications also.
I believe Lauren also did one in yoga
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that. What's the health committee like? What kind of functions do they play?
Well, the health care committee is headed actually by Ben and Fanley, the healthcare administrators, with a good-sized committee, about 20 people, residents, who just give input on things that could improve the two health centers. Before they built Baldwin Park, we gave some input on the actual floor plans for the building of the rehab center over there. I guess the most notable thing is the remodeling of the bathrooms in the health center here to make them more user-friendly. for the actual users and not just the designers who aren't going to use it.
Have you been in have you looked at the new ones as they're remodeling them? Do they look like the one that they built downstairs?
I haven't looked at them,
Oh.
yeah. I know, I think it's just a good idea maybe to stay out of that construction area, but hopefully they'll look like the ones down in the basement, the one down there.
Good. I hope so. They got some nice features in that as they worked with it, and from resident input as well.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Florida?
I actually grew up in the Orlando area. My parents moved to Orlando when I was a toddler, and I don't really consider myself a Southerner because my mother was from Pennsylvania. My father grew up in the Midwest and had lived in the Northeast. So, and Florida is not really a Southern state, I don't think, but I did grow up here. Went to elementary school in College Park, and it was just such a different time. We walked to school, had a half a dozen girlfriends that lived within 2 or 3 blocks. It was a great place to grow up. Then we moved over to the other side of town and lived real close to Boone High School. So in high school, I walked to high school also. And you knew all the high schools. It was just it was a great place to grow up looking back. At the time, you probably hated a lot of things, of course, with restrictions from your parents. But looking back on it, it was a really nice place to grow up. And of course, when Disney came in '71, things changed, but not immediately, other than we had a great theme park to go to right down the street. And then I went to Orlando Junior College, which was a private junior college in Orlando at the time. If you're familiar with where Lake Highland Prep is, that was the location of the junior college. A couple years after I graduated, Valencia, which is a state school, came to town, and that junior college, I guess, turned into a prep school, really. And then after that, I went to Florida State. Go Noles. I went to Florida State for a year, majored in home ec, and then actually quit, got married, eventually went back to Rollins and got a degree in business.
And what work have you done with these degrees?
Well, with the business degree, the best thing that the business degree did for me was that when a master's degree came along, I had a bachelor's degree. So I got a master's degree in home economics education from Florida State also. And that allowed me to actually, for about 25 years, teach cooking for adults in the Orange County school system in their adult education program at nighttime. Cooking, no homework, no grades. No, sometimes barely any attendance, but all hands-on.
Were these non-credit courses?
Oh yeah, it was just for fun. Yeah.
Oh.
Fun.
How do you teach adults to cook if they supposedly have already been cooking?
Well, that's interesting. The very, very first class I ever taught, there was a lady in the class who probably, certainly at that time, owned more cookbooks than I did, and had been to Cordon Bleu in Paris, where part of the program was in French. They did not give you copies of the recipes. So I figured if I could get through a class with someone who was way ahead of me, that I could probably manage okay. And the thing I realized very quickly was that the biggest gratification for me, and it was a paid job, small amount of pay, was when someone came back the next week and said, "Oh, I made that dessert and everybody loved it." So that was the biggest thrill that I got out of cooking. Plus, I know that there's people out there that are still making my recipes now, so that's fun.
That must be gratifying.
It is. It
yeah.
is.
What kind of dishes did you cook? Were they sort of garden variety or specialties or what?
Before I started teaching, I went and took a class from another lady that was doing the same type of thing I was going to do. And she made a dish where you actually deboned a whole chicken but left it intact. And I said, I'm never doing that. So my goal was really to do things that people would go home and make. They weren't too complicated. they used ingredients that you could find, at your store. You didn't have to go searching or, really looking hard for the ingredients. And I realized also pretty quickly that not everybody's going to like everything, and that's okay. You have to just live with that. Yeah.
Did you get the question that somebody asked Ina Garten one time, and that is, how do you tell when an egg is bad?
Well, something about floating, or I don't remember. I don't know. I don't think I've ever had an egg that was bad, but I know in junior high school home ec, they always said to break every egg into a separate container in case it was bad.
Actually, if you have ever had an egg that's bad, you don't need information or instruction.
No.
You know immediately.
They smell awful.
It smells bad, very badly.
Yeah.
Well, beyond cooking, what then did you do next?
Well, I mean, that was always a part-time job. It was pretty much at night. So before I retired in 2012, for the 17 years before that, I had worked at Webster University, which Webster is actually based in St. Louis. It's a small private liberal arts school, but they have about 100 campuses across the United States and in probably 8 or 10 countries. And we mostly in Orlando offered master's degrees to working adults at nighttime and on weekends. And I did recruiting and some academic advising, and I really enjoyed it. But when I retired, it was time.
What kind of advising and support do adults need in getting to a program together?
Well, a master's degree is kind of pretty cut and dry, but we also offered a bachelor's completion program, which is a little bit hard to offer with a limited number of courses. But I really loved having somebody that would come in and they had been to a couple different colleges over several different years and try to pull all their credits together and get them a bachelor's degree. And not get it, but get it together so they could finish their bachelor's degree. And I guess when I look back on it, that was good business for us, because then they could get a master's degree, which was the much bigger part of our program.
So basically you had to look at the courses that they had and see how it fit into one of your sets of requirements.
Right. So we, of course, I guess all schools have some kind of general education requirements, and Webster had 9 courses that you had to have at least one course in each of those areas. And then most schools have a requirement that you have to do at least 30 semester hours, or whatever hours are used in quarters, at that school before they'll grant a degree to you. So getting all that together.
And what were the master's programs like? What areas did you have?
Well, we had an MBA, we had a master's in healthcare administration, finance, human resources, computer science, about 8 or 10 different degree programs. You could take 1 class or 2 classes a term. We had 5 terms. So actually, I remember one student who wasn't working who did an MBA in a year. She could take enough classes. Most of the people were working, so you never encouraged anybody to take more than 2. I mean, I don't think you could take more than 2, but so you could finish an MBA even at 2 classes in about a year and a half. So.
Did you establish real friendships with some of these people that lasted beyond the academic?
Yes, a couple actually. 2 in particular. Webster is kind of known for having a lot of international students, and outside of the main campus in St. Louis, the Orlando campuses had the biggest percentage of international students. So I did get to be friends with a gal who was originally from Turkey, and she actually went back to Turkey, and she's been back here, and I've visited with her here, and actually have been to her apartment in Ankara. So that was really fabulous. And another gal who is in Amsterdam, and have met up with her a couple times on trips. And I wish that I had kind of kept in touch with more of the international students, because when you travel, it's so much fun to know somebody that lives in the country. Even if you only spend a couple hours with them, it's just so much fun to meet up with them.
Yeah, I've had that kind of experience, and it is great. You've traveled a bit.
I have. I have been to maybe about 40 countries, which when you think of how many countries there are in the world, that's only a few. Traveled to most of the countries in Europe. I've been on 5 Viking River cruises. I've covered most of those. Been to Australia and New Zealand, South Pacific, the Baltic countries.
What are your favorite experiences from your travel?
Well, being in Australia was pretty awesome. It was a really long time ago. That was pretty amazing. I think that probably my favorite trip was my late husband and I spent 2 weeks in the South Pacific, and we went to the French Polynesian Islands, Tahiti, Bora Bora, and I can't think of the other one. And then we went to the Cook Islands, which are pretty remote, and that was probably in the mid-'80s. So there was one island we stayed on that had totally 2, I don't even know what to call them. They're like the old Florida motels, you know. There was 2 of those you could stay at, and it was just a lot of fun. We flew around and we took a boat a couple times to the different places, but I think we wore shorts and sandals and bathing suits for 2 weeks, and it was great.
Where was your favorite spot in Europe with the Viking tours?
I really, really loved the cruise from St. Petersburg to Moscow. I'd always wanted to go to Russia, and I figured out the reason for that when I had taken some classes at Rollins during the summers before I actually went back to finish my degree. I had taken a class in Russian geography for some reason. I always liked geography, and I think that's why I always wanted to go to Russia. And it was just fascinating to go from one huge city, St. Petersburg, to another huge city, Moscow, and be kind of out in a big giant forest on a relatively quiet river, not anywhere near as busy as the rivers in Germany with the barges going by all the time and just lots of boats. Didn't even see that many pleasure boats, but it was just this quiet, few little small towns, and the contrast of the big giant cities to the small towns. And my mother was Polish, so we had more food that seemed kind of familiar. Things with poppy seeds, which my mom used to make, and you don't find until you get pretty far west in Europe. So.
Did the Russians Russia was formed along the rivers. The transportation in Russia was done by the Vikings, actually, along the rivers. And
Yeah.
did they bring some citizens aboard the ship for entertainment and cultural stuff?
I don't really remember people coming on, but at the place where we were docked in St. Petersburg, there was a big hall where they had Cossack dancers and of course, intermission, we had to have shots of vodka.
Of
Of course.
Of course.
And, so that was fun to see that. One thing that was different about that trip, compared to other Viking trips I've been on, was that there was 3 tour guides, and they happened to all be men, who stayed on the ship and did lectures. And then when we were in different places, they would be, perhaps one of the tour guides. But I had never experienced where the same tour guides were so knowledgeable about the culture of the location where you were, and then did lectures and just kind of were part of the crew on the ship. Yeah. I also, when I came back, a few people have said, well, did you feel like you were being watched? And I'm like, no. I didn't feel like I was being watched. But then it occurred to me that there was like 3 extra tour guides that were with us all the time. And pretty much every tour we went on off the ship, there was, you know, if you were on a bus, there was the bus driver, there was the tour guide, and then there was always one other person kind of to keep the group together at the back. So we weren't watched, but we kind of had extra chaperones.
So maybe you were watched and not realizing it. Well, now you moved into Orlando at a time when it was growing and changing. Did you experience a lot of that change here? How did that impact?
Well, when you look back at it, it's easier to realize how things have changed, but at the time I don't think that, you know, as a kid you're not aware of it so much.
Did you go to Disney a lot?
Not that much, you know, even then it was pricey. Yeah. I think that, you know, Orlando, a lot of people don't realize this, but when Martin Marietta came to town is really when Orlando started to grow. And I didn't, I guess I had some friends whose parents, you know, fathers maybe worked at Martin, but I didn't have any family really that did, so I guess I wasn't so much aware of that. But it was a great place to grow up. It was a small town until they built Colonial Plaza, which is, I still call it Colonial Plaza. There on Colonial between Bumby and Primrose. That was the first strip center, and when they first opened that, it was just a strip, and then it became a big mall. But before that, the only place to shop was downtown, and it was a great place for a kid because there were 4 five and dimes within a block and a half of each other, and 2 major department stores that were 5 and 6 stories, which Orlando has really never had those kind of tall department stores after that, really. And a Sears, of course, and a Penny's, and Western Auto, and 3 movie theaters within 2 or 3 blocks of each other.
Wow.
And the library, you know, within about a 4 or 5 block range, you could have everything you ever wanted.
You didn't even have to go on I-4.
I-4 wasn't even built yet. When did that get built? Like in the mid-60s, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did Martin Marietta have to Orlando? I know it was huge.
Well, actually, you know, now that I think about it, my uncle worked there for a short time, and they had built I-4, and it ended kind of where you went into what's now Lockheed Martin on Sand Lake Road. Mm-hmm. There was no traffic, but he's talked about how they, you know, would go down that road and it went just right into Martin. I guess it just, well, a lot of people, there was a big influx of people that moved here from Maryland. I think it's where Martin Marietta's, one of their main locations were. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, or right about the same time, was when the space program was getting going over in Brevard County, so it was kind of tied in together. And of course the companies that located there with the space program, it all similar kinds of companies.
Did you get it over to any of the space shots as growing up?
Yeah. Well, not so much growing up, but afterwards, particularly when the space shuttle program started, there was a time that I can remember taking my son and a couple of his friends over there, and it was actually a really early morning launch, so we went over there and got a place to park at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and kind of pretended to sleep in the car, and then the launch was right about dawn, and you could at that time park where you could actually see the fire underneath it when it went up, and it was an exciting place to live. And every time there was a shuttle going up, you made a point of, even from here, going out in your yard and looking at it. Yeah.
I remember we watched from St. Petersburg, and we tried to from the roof of a building, and we saw a little lead pencil, little tiny lead pencil going
but that's
up
still exciting.
from up there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What have you done in terms of volunteering in the community?
Well, right now I'm a member of the Winter Park Women's Club and serve on their charitable giving committee and their scholarship committee. a member of AAUW, American Association of University Women, where I actually chair their scholarship committee, which is quite a bit more work than the scholarship here because they have 3 different types of scholarships they give. And I've recently, for about 5 years, I worked on a project called Catch Healthy Habits, which was a spin-off of the Rollins Lifelong Learning Program. And that program matched up seniors, like us, with grade K through 5 students to offer an after-school program that taught basically nutrition, had a healthy snack, and then about a half an hour of exercise. So I worked on that from the very beginning till just recently. But years ago, I think the thing that really got me started in doing volunteer work is I was a member of a federated women's club. It was called Junior Cirrhosis. It's now called the GFWC, Orlando Junior Women's Club, GFWC being the national organization. I served as president. I went on to serve on in a couple of state positions, and always credit that organization with things that helped me in many other jobs after that, like how to write a press release and just kind of a lot of organizational skills.
You've been involved with a lot of scholarships to help people
Yeah.
help people out. Do they make a great impact? Do they encourage people to go back to school that might not otherwise be able to make it?
Well, I would say that for the most part, it's people that are already enrolled in school. It's a little easier to give somebody a scholarship particularly when we always send the money directly to the school. They need to be already enrolled and accepted at a school. The Women's Club scholarships are for high school seniors, so that's been a little bit different because the other scholarships that I've worked on have mostly been for women who are at least already in school for a couple years. The most rewarding part of that, though, is to help somebody who's a little bit older, who is, I can think of one particular case where this gal, she already had a bachelor's degree in computer science, but she hadn't worked for quite a while. And so she went back and got all her skills brought up to date and got a really great job. So that was really rewarding to see someone who was about 40 years old, go back and was able to really benefit from the further education.
The education really sort of set her up for something new and distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That must be very gratifying.
It is. And not everybody got out of high school and went through 4 years of college with their parents paying for it, me included. So my parents paid for the first 3 years, and then I was on my own, and so I eventually went back to Rollins, and finished my degree.
Yeah.
So I can always relate to people that are doing that.
Yeah.
And it's, as our academic director at Webster always said, education is something that they can never take away from you. And he would always say this at graduation, which was around hurricane season, and he would say it was something that the hurricane could never blow away. So I always remember that your education's always there. So
that's terrific. What brought you to Westminster?
Well, I would just say what I've always told people when they ask me that. My husband and I had been married for a little over 30 years. He had passed away, and we were living in a house about 4 miles from here on a lake, and I had already been involved in some things kind of in the Winter Park area, and I decided I didn't need to stay in that house like a lot of people do. And I actually saw an ad for Lockberry Apartments, and I said, whoa, my house is over 30 years old. These are brand new. They're on a lake. They're closer to Winter Park. Maybe I can afford it. I wasn't so sure about that part. And so I moved here when, I had retired and moved here about, 8 months later, I guess. And it's probably the best thing I ever did. I think that, it's given me an incredible opportunity to be involved in way more things than I would have ever probably been involved in it if I'd stayed in my house. And I have a really fabulous apartment. A lot of people say I have the best apartment in Lockberry.
Oh, no, we have the best apartment in Westminster.
Wow. So it was a really good decision. Yeah, and I guess I'm absolute living proof of what I hear a lot of people say, that you need to move here before you really need to move here. You should move here before you need to move here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you haven't, it hasn't cut back on your social and cultural and life in general. You haven't had to cut back on that having moved here.
No, I'm doing more than I ever did.
A lot of us
I
are.
say that I would rather stuff envelopes for a nonprofit organization than to worry about who's going to cut my grass. And that I've said that probably 25 times to people, and it's the absolute truth. You know, living in the house and being by yourself, you feel a little bit nervous about that in itself. And then just, you know, who's going to show up and do this and what. So I really had no problem moving. I was lucky because I got a big enough apartment that I don't think I had to get rid of anything that I wasn't okay getting rid of it. You know, I kept all the things I really wanted, and you know, have a parking space in the garage. And I don't think I would have been involved in anywhere near as many things if I'd stayed in my house. Yeah, if I sold it now, I'd make a lot more money. But
Is your apartment in Lockberry, is that big enough to keep you from getting stir crazy now that you're spending more time in it?
it is, because I got really lucky when I moved into Lockberry. I have one of the 10 apartments with a den, so I have two bedrooms and a den. So it's also given me a lot of space to have a lot of stuff, way too much stuff. So I'm using this time to try to clear out some of that stuff. Yeah, which I guess everyone is doing right now.
The sock drawers, I guess you start there.
That's the easy part. Yeah.
But how is this period of time going with you?
Well, I've stayed pretty busy, but all 3 of the scholarship things that I'm involved in have had things that I needed to do. They're pretty much over now, but things that happened in April no matter what. So I was still doing that. I've still had to take minutes at a resident council executive committee meeting. Our other committees haven't met, and until recently we were still doing putt-putt, which is kind of called off for now. But I've stayed busy. I've cooked some things, not as much as I normally would, because I started taking advantage of the 1 meal a day, which is fabulous. It's so much fun to see what you get. And I've stayed busy.
You're not still teaching your cooking class here at Westminster?
No, we had to cancel that. But the Cooking with Karen is a lot of fun. And I tell people I do all the work, and then when they get there, they do the work. Actually, I plan the menus and make copies of the recipes for everybody, buy all the groceries, and when they get there, then it's a hands-on. We divide into group, and they make all the recipes, and we have some really great, delicious things to eat. And
no food fights?
No food fights. I don't have the real expectation of people going home and making things, although there was one really heartwarming case where a lady who had to get her caregiver to help her measure the ingredients who made one of the desserts and took it to a family gathering. So that was really special when she told me about that.
No bad days.
Yeah, that's me.
No bad days, surrounded by roses.
I'm not even that fond of roses, but when I saw this shirt, it was not a big investment, because if you're familiar with a store called Five and Under, I think is what it's called. It was a $5 shirt.
Yeah.
And I bought it, and I said, I got to have that shirt. So, you know, part of a day might not be so much fun or happy, but basically I just look at everything being a good day. Yeah, I don't really hold grudges for very long. I kind of get over it really quick, and I think that's a good thing.
Especially in a time like this. It's true. It's true other times. But the one thing you can control always is your attitude.
Yep.
Karen, it's been so much fun. Thank you for
You're welcome.
talking with me, and I'm sure our fellow residents will enjoy getting to know a little more about you through Notable Neighbors. Thank you.
Thanks.